Welcome to the Blue Leadership Podcast, hosted by Dennis Nayer, a retired multi-agency police chief from the state of New York. Blue Leadership is a podcast by law enforcement for today's law enforcement leaders, taking you inside the experiences and careers of public safety experts from across the country.
Maddie, thank you for that introduction. Great to be back. And today's guest is Chief Mike Moulton of the city of El Cajon, California Police Department. Chief Moulton has 29 years in law enforcement, 5 years as their chief. He's a graduate of a post-command college, PERF's SMIP, graduate of SLI. He has his MS, Law Enforcement and Public Safety Leadership, master's degree, tons of other leadership experience. And without further ado, Chief Moulton, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, Chief.
We're going to jump right in. And one of the things I wanted to start with is I was a cutting-edge chief. You're always doing things that are progressive and bringing the department forward. And you have started recently a drone first responder program. And I'd love for you to talk to the viewers and listeners about what that program is, talk a little bit about its successes, what inspired it, and just whatever you feel is relevant.
So we started using drones, like many others, probably, over 5 years ago, between 5 and 10 years ago, for very limited, tactical operation type stuff. And we started dabbling in what is referred to as DFR now, drone as first responder, actually a couple of years ago. It was very sporadic. It wasn't really scheduled. And then just recently, this year, we've become much more involved with it. We have, we're doing it twice a week on a regular basis. So we kind of, crawled, walked, and then, are getting to running. Fortunately, in the San Diego region, Chula Vista is one of our neighbors, and Chula Vista is kind of a pioneer in drone as a first responder. So we were able to watch them build their program. Our people that run the program, learned a lot from them and others like them that really pioneered drone as first responder. So we started, like I said, being pretty regular with it. Just the couple of months, we really, moved forward and started to sprint with it. So we do it twice a week. We're getting some successes out of it, some that we've done press releases about, using it in retail theft. And I know that's probably something we'll probably touch on later. But really, I think what drones give us, I think the three main game-changing things to me in my mind and drone as a first responder program are time on scene, so response times. It's really changing, it's a game changer as far as response times go. It's a game changer as far as the situational awareness that it provides the officers, that are responding to calls. And then something's connected, I think, to the situational awareness component is the benefits it adds to de-escalation. Because if we can get an area of presence, giving us real-time situational awareness, it's going to help our de-escalation efforts on a lot of the calls that we respond to.
And curiously, and I'm familiar with Chula Vista's pioneering program of the DFRs, is yours, do you have officers as a set schedule that they're there with their drones on a rooftop somewhere ready to respond as the calls come in?
We do. So, and they can be proactive too. They can listen to calls and launch from there. So we have a number of both sworn officers and non-sworn professional staff that are certified FAA drone pilots and visual observers. So yeah, that's the system that we have. We only do one drone at a time. And I'm sure as we, as this conversation takes place, we'll get deeper into it. But I think we're kind of at the verge, we're kind of at the dawn of a real change in the drone space because of the COAs that are being issued through FAA now, some of the other technologies like ground-based radar. Because right now, so when those changes take place, that's when it's really going to become cost-effective solution, in some of the public safety enhancements we're trying to add. Right now, as your listeners probably know, to launch a drone, the COA that we have with the FAA, we need a pilot and we need a visual observer. So it's two, full-time staff operating that drone. In the future, and I think in the pretty near-term future, we're going to be in an environment where a single person can launch multiple drones. We will be able to fly beyond visual line of sight, and we'll be able to fly without visual observers. And when those things happen, that's really going to change the landscape of how drones are used in public safety.
And that was a question I was going to ask, if you had the variance that allows your drone to be operated out of the visual line of sight.
Yeah, we do not. So we have to fly it within line of sight. Now, fortunately, we launch from one of the larger buildings in our city. And our city is about 105,000 people, but it's only 14 square miles. Um, so from that high vantage point, and if you look at the topography of my city, it's very flat. The valley floor is very flat. So we can fly a large portion of our city from that visual line of sight that we have because of the environment that we have.
And do you use them for tactical, for overwatch, for maybe a large event, even if it's a peaceful event, like a road race or some community organized event? Do you use them for that purpose?
Absolutely. So, and we've been using them for that purpose for quite some time. So for special tactical events, but also the large community events where we're concerned about, public safety because of large gatherings. So we have another large event coming up in the city that's a Halloween carnival. And we integrate that, we layer that into our other visual surveillance that we use. We'll put up camera trailers, but certainly the drones are a big part of that because we can move, throughout the crowd and stuff when there are problems. So it's a big part of our, of our Overwatch capability.
And just curious, how was your community with it? Because some communities are very against it. They look at civil liberties and things that the drones would be used as like Big Brother is watching, and other communities are for it because they understand the force multiplier effect and the ability to provide better safety. How was your community when you first brought them on?
I think, we've experienced both sides of that, and exactly what you said. Some people are concerned about this. I think the biggest thing is being transparent about it, what you're using it for. I'll call back to Chula Vista because I think they've been a pioneer in this, and I hope that we can get to this point. Was they list all their flights on their website, so you can go in and see where they've flown and things like that. So I think we'll get there as well. But being transparent with the community in community meetings and those types of things are very important. If you're not transparent about these technologies that you're using, you're going to lose them. So I think it's paramount that you're transparent about them, because we ran into the same thing with ALPR as well that we just launched about a year ago, and that's been extremely successful. But being just very open and honest about what technologies we're using, when we're using them, how we're using them, we have to be transparent about that.
For sure. And for the listeners and viewers, I'm sure most know it. For those who don't, ALPR is the automated license plate readers. And yeah, that kind of falls into that same spectrum where some people see it as a good thing, others see it as intrusive. And I think you really hit the nail on the head. It's really being able to properly be transparent and explain how it's used and demonstrate that to be able to get the benefits of it.
Absolutely.
Chief, just one last question for that before we move on. Success rate, have you had any things that comes to mind of maybe a situation that could have turned extremely violent or extremely bad in some other way had that drone not been available to be part of the response?
Yeah, no, I mean, those situations happen, and it goes back to the situational awareness that it's providing and the de-escalation, that it's affording. So yeah, we have had some instances where it's provided additional standoff distance for the officers when they're dealing, with armed subjects, because we have that vantage point from the air. Another recent one, because theft is such a big issue right now, in California. And with something we recently did a press release about, and we actually released the video to the news so they could see it. One of the issues with, theft is we're often not on scene quick enough, and the person that's committing the theft gets away. So it is enhancing our capabilities in that realm. And, when somebody calls in a theft, if there are no units clear, because there are priority calls, we can send the drone over. And recently we did that and tracked a theft suspect, and we're later able to send uniformed officers to go make contact with that individual and arrest them.
And you went right into the question I was going to ask, is just how they do connect with managing retail theft. Because yes, that's been a key issue from coast to coast across the country, and obviously California has a lot. And correct me if I'm wrong, please, but they changed the threshold. I think it's anything that's less than $950 in the state of California is a much lower level offense, and the criminals know that. So is that part of the reason that it's become so rampant?
Yeah, for sure. So anything under $950 is a misdemeanor, and in our county we can't book misdemeanor arrests, so they're getting a ticket. So we're literally arresting the same people day after day after day for theft, for stealing. They know what the thresholds are, so they're not going above them. There's some legislation that's going to be on the ballot this November that's going to kind of undo some of that and give us some more tools. So we'll see how that works out. But in the meantime, yeah, one, retailers have simply, stopped reporting theft, or they did. Back in February, I met with all our big box retailers, and I sent out officers and some of our non-sworn staff to meet with, all our little stores like markets and things like that. We want to accurately capture theft in the city, the amount of theft that's taking place in the city. So we've asked our retailers in the small markets to report every time something's stolen. So I just saw statistics the other day. Year to date, our theft is up 42% for under $400. Because we knew it's not that the act of theft is occurring more, it's that they're reporting it more because we've asked them to. So one of the things that drones have helped us do that I just alluded to, and it's just occurred, is theft is a misdemeanor crime. And, we have a busy city. We have a high call volume city. So oftentimes all our units are tied up on priority calls. So if a theft occurs, it could be 10, 20, 30, 45 minutes until we can get an officer clear to respond. So, and by the, as the time, if somebody calls in a theft that's occurring now and we don't get out there for a half an hour, the thief is long gone. So one of the things that the drones are helping us in that ability is if somebody calls in a theft and we have a drone up, we can send the drone, we can track that person until an officer is available to go make contact and arrest that person. So that's the big game-changing thing as far as theft is concerned, that drones are enhancing our capabilities.
Yeah, and I would imagine that it can also take still photographs, and you can gain a high-resolution photo if for some reason you lose sight or they go into a building or whatever.
Yeah, so I mean, the video quality of the drones, is amazing nowadays. And you can take photos at night. It's got, our drones have FLIR capability. So the capabilities of the drones are pretty impressive.
Wow, FLIR capability. That is. Well, I think for the listeners and viewers, if any of them are at agencies considering a drone as a way to help deal with shortages in staffing or deal with some of the crimes, I think this is a good podcast for them to listen to, and just some of the things you've said. One of the things I wanted to ask you, Chief, switching gears completely, when you went through the MS Lepsil program at University of San Diego, you had already been a chief. So you're already doing these high-level, top-end executive functions day in and day out, but you chose to pursue that master's degree. I have two questions. One, why did you make that choice to pursue it while you're already the top CEO of your department? And what value did it bring in your role as chief?
So I actually planned on doing it, before I was appointed as a chief. And the timing was never right, and then I became a chief and the timing was never right. But it was always a goal of mine to complete my master's degree. Really selfishly from a personal standpoint and a professional standpoint. From a personal standpoint, I wanted to show, my children that higher education was important to me, for them to see me, complete an advanced degree, once I was very set in my career and, could see the finish line of that career. And two, from a professional standpoint, I wanted to show those that work for me the same thing, that higher education is important. I think, it makes you a better, well-rounded leader. And they all knew that I was going to the program, or many of them did. We have other graduates from Lepsil within the department. So I wanted to show that I placed a priority, on that as the leader of the organization. So those are a couple of the big reasons that, I completed it. The timing, like I said before, the timing is never right, but at some point you just have to commit and do it. And it was a tremendous program. The value that it's added to me, I had a great time in the program, especially in the discussion boards. Those that are familiar with the program, just the interaction that you have with others from all, walks of life, from different points in their career, different levels in the organization. I really grew from that, having those interactions with other chiefs, with other officers, real, pertinent conversations, contemporary conversations. The instruction was top notch. So I gained a lot, from a practical standpoint of learning more academically about leadership, but also practicing it within the course with others.
And did you find things readily applicable to your role as chief and applying them to what the needs were for your city and department?
Yeah, and that's one of the best things that I see with most universities that I've dealt with nowadays is being real contemporary with the information. I've seen universities getting away from books because maybe the information's already years old once you get that book. So yeah, the information's up to date, and we're talking about really emerging issues like drones, like ALPR, like AI, which is important because there's leadership concepts and that we can talk about that are older concepts that still are applicable, but this environment is changing so rapidly. This public safety, this policing environment is changing so rapidly. So it's important, that the program is like that, where we're talking about contemporary things, we're talking about emerging issues. Extremely important.
For sure, yeah. So the theory is driving the practice, and the practice is forming the theory, and that circle kind of just helps things continue to improve and evolve.
Absolutely.
So we talked a little bit about retail theft as one of the issues. We kind of alluded to the fact of staffing shortages and dealing with those challenges, dealing with technology. I would love to hear from you as what you think is, for your agency and the institution of policing as a whole, what are the biggest challenges that you're facing right now and that we're facing coast to coast?
I know homelessness is an issue just about in every jurisdiction, and really such in California. Law enforcement leaders I've talked to across the country, list homelessness as a top issue. And it's obviously a very complicated issue. In California, I think we spent $30 billion over the last 4 years trying to address it, and it's gotten worse year over year. So I don't think, you and I are going to come up with solutions in an hour on the podcast. So, we have to have open conversations about it. Society has to have open conversations about, like, what do we want the police to do? What do we want the police role to be in that? So it's one of the leading things that I'm dealing with on a day-to-day basis from the community, issues involving homelessness. Now, specifically in California, and I talked about this earlier, there's some legislative issues we need to address in California that have removed kind of consequences and accountability to what are considered low-level crimes like theft and drug use and those types of things. I think that will move the needle, once we address those on that type of thing. The other, issue I think facing law enforcement is recruitment and retention across the United States. It's some of its lowest levels in, the past decades, especially in California, that I'm dealing with specifically. So recruitment and retention, and it's funny, I went to PERF's Senior Management Institute and Policing Program, I think 5 years ago. And the core issue at that time, there's 100 people that go to that program. And the core issue at that time was recruitment and retention. It's gotten significantly worse since then. For my agency in particular, we did a deep dive in 2021, and we went back 3 years. And what we found is when we would open up a recruitment, and we were doing recruitments 3 to 4 times a year, we would get on average 250 applicants per recruitment. Sometimes the number would be 300. We say even up to 400, but the average over that 3-year period per recruitment was 250. After 2020, so after COVID and after the public unrest we saw after the death of George Floyd, that number fell to 60. So we went, minus 4x, and we have not really recovered since then. It is getting better, but the problem is it fell off a cliff overnight, and it's taking a long time to return to that. And, everyone in law enforcement knows there's this huge accordion effect, because it's not like we're hiring police officers and they're going into the field the next day. For my agency, when I hire somebody, they might not be serving the community for 18 months. They're going to a full-time academy for 7 months. They're coming back to us for field training for 5 months. So we are with those low recruitment numbers, it's really affected staffing.
Same here on the East Coast. We're 3,000 miles apart, but the same exists. And curiously, so for 250 applicants, how many positions were that you were going to try to fill?
On average, we'd have anywhere from 2, to 6 vacancies or something like that.
So Yeah, so that's amazing. And I think what I was going to get at, and I was going to figure it was going to be something like a low amount, but you have that many people to choose from. That gives you the ability to have quality control and only the best, most suitable people to wear that uniform and reflect the profession in your agency. And what it's done, and I'm sure you can speak to this in volumes, what it's done is it's now limited that quality control from agencies. So maybe someone that maybe you would have passed over because maybe they didn't have a high enough tolerance to stress or resilience or something that may affect their suitability, you're now bringing them on. And not all cases, but it's just affecting the profession in so many ways. But when you need to fill vacancies because the officers that are there are being burnt out, they're retiring, and the attrition is far outpacing those who you can bring on for the reasons you stated. Because the same here, it takes a year and a half from the time you offer a job to them completing the academy, field training, and so forth. It's a lot. So I would agree that is one of the most challenging issues, whether you're in New York, California, and anywhere in between.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, Dennis, I'm going to pause for 1 minute here because my lights are on a timer because you have an energy lead building. So they're on a motion sensor. So I'm going to go click them back on and then come back to them.
Sure.
I don't even know if you could tell in your video, but it got real dark in here.
Just a little bit. But the funny thing is, in my office, when mine went out, I always had like one of these like stress balls on my desk, and I would throw it so that the lights would go back on. And
that's I only have to do that.
So yeah, that's the challenge. That's what we're working with in terms of trying to maintain this high quality policing environment of only the best, most suitable people for a job that is so stressful and trauma based and important. And you're getting so few. And even agencies like in New York, the New York State Police, that was always an agency that was so difficult to get in, and they had long waiting lists. I've never seen them recruit so heavily in commercials and videos and just LED signs on the highway, just everything. So that it just shows it doesn't matter what agency, they're all struggling.
Yeah. And, the biggest impact I saw was from the protests and riots across the nation. And people I've talked to, and it's society, we need to, I'm speaking not as a police officer, as a police chief, but as a member of society. We have to respect and cherish our law enforcement officers. They're out there every day trying to serve the community the best they can, a vast majority of them, and we really have to, as a society, show that we appreciate that, because I think we kind of turned out a generation of people to wanting to be police officers, because all they saw on the news and social media on a daily basis for months on end was the vilification of policing. And now, as a society, we're reaping that, because we're not getting a lot of applicants to come into this profession. And so it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. We want good people in this profession. To get good people to apply into this profession, as a community, as a society, we have to show that we appreciate those that enter into service as first responders.
Yeah, I agree. And what you just said was so powerful, because I was a chief during those times as well. And the nonstop civil unrest and the vilification of us as an entire institution, and all of the things the officers were dealing with daily. We had recruitment units that in good faith couldn't try to recruit people, because how could they sell the job to people that they had lost their love for it and their motivation to do it. So yeah, you're right. I never looked at it that way as how you just described it, but an entire generation now has chose different career fields, and now it becomes the arduous task of regrouping and changing that dynamic.
Yeah, and I think, like I said, we're on the path to recovery, but if it takes 10 years, and I recently wrote an article about this, and that's another reason that we have to adopt these technologies, to enhance our public safety capabilities. Because if we're not going to be able to hire police officers at the rate we need to, then we're going to have to integrate things like drones, DFR, things like ALPR, to assist us with that loss of staffing.
Yeah, I agree. It's just like maintenance with anything. You have to maintain. Once you start letting something go and try to play catch up, whether it's your vehicle fleet, your physical health, whatever, it becomes this Herculean task to try to just get what you could have had easily if you just maintained. So um,
That's a
it's
great analogy.
definitely a challenge. Chief, I want to ask you, everything you just talked about, it's all leadership based. To kind of think outside the box, get creative, stay motivated when there's tasks and challenges that are unmotivating. Can you just share with the listeners and viewers a little bit of your particular leadership philosophies that keep you going?
I think I adopt, after all the leadership models that we have, I think I kind of default to being a servant leader, trying to serve those people that are really doing the work. And I talk about this concept in my agency, and I have over the last 5 years. The backbone of our agency is patrol. There's a couple things we need. When somebody calls 911, they need somebody to answer that call, and then we need to send a police officer out there. And everything else supports that mission. Every job is important. Of course, the homicide detective's job is extremely important, but everything comes back to supporting the patrol function. That function of somebody calling 911 because they're in need, and us sending a police officer to go deal with that issue. So I share that with my staff, and I've shared it with them since I started being a police chief. I said, even my job is to support that mission. So just supporting your folks, giving them what they need. We all want the same thing. I want my employees to perform at their peak. I want them to perform at their best ability, both sworn and non-sworn. So my job as the leader of that is to give them the tools they need to do that, to be successful and perform at their peak. So that's kind of what I've focused, my leadership philosophy on, serving my people, trying to give them the tools that they need or whatever they need for them to perform at their best. Because like, as I mentioned before earlier, the city of El Cajon is a fast-paced environment. It's a busy city, high call volume. So I need people operating. I need people performing at their peak. So getting them there and, getting everybody on the same page of that's what our goal is, that's important.
That's such a powerful philosophy. And to dovetail off that, for the listeners and viewers, are there any particular books or podcasts that you recommend that can help aspiring leaders or current leaders to do their job in tough times and better themselves and be, more apt to meet the needs of those that they're leading?
And so I thought about this earlier, when if we're talking about from a law enforcement perspective, certainly podcasts like this are very important because, they're very contemporary information, specific to what we're trying to accomplish out there in society and what our goals are for our organizations. But I'm also a true believer in just consuming knowledge. Most of the podcasts I listen to are stuff that I don't know anything about, but I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I was listening to one the other day about the fall of the Roman Empire. I didn't know anything about, the fall of the Roman Empire, but it was engaging to me and I learned a lot. So I think just consuming knowledge, just consuming knowledge in any subject you can, whether it be, world affairs, economics, everything's going to make you a more well-rounded leader. If you understand the environment around you, it's going to make you a better leader. So what I always suggest to people when people are asking for podcast suggestions, I ask them what they're interested in, try to point them, to things that they may be interested in, because that's what's going to keep you engaged. There's a lot of great leadership books out there, but the one I always think about, and I was exposed to it in California post SLI, was A Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. And that was a powerful book for me. And it has been, now for the better part of 20 years, because this is like we talked about earlier, and I'm not even sure if it was offline or on this podcast. It's a stressful profession, and, getting through it is difficult at times. So I've leaned on that book a lot of times in the past, to get me through things. The most important message in that book is you decide how you feel about things. You might not decide what you get dealt, but you get to decide how you feel about that. And that's always been a powerful message for me, and it's gotten me through a lot of difficult times throughout my career, including in this leadership role.
Yeah, what a great book to reference. And for those who don't know, Viktor Frankl was an a person who was in concentration camps in the Holocaust, and the conditions were more brutal than we could ever possibly imagine or describe. But he wouldn't let them take away his faith and his belief in how he chose to have what his outlook was. And then he wrote a book when he was liberated. But you're right, that's a powerful book to really put things in perspective and to really show, like, the one thing you can control is your attitude and your outlook. What a great example.
Absolutely.
And, Chief, one thing actually I wanted to touch on to really tie in and wrap up what you said is with the learning, that constant learning. Now, with all the things that are out there on YouTube and Reels, they don't have to just be like silly, mindless things. There's so much micro learning that can be done on leadership. And, whether it's, you were talking about the Roman Empire, and I mean, whether you want to learn something brief on that and learn a little bit about Stoicism and Marcus Aurelius, or if you want to look on, I don't know, how to build something, if you want to make some improvements in your break room at your department, you go to YouTube. I mean, there's so much out there. And I really think that's also a good component to wellness, to being able to disconnect from maybe the stresses of the day and go learn something, even if it's for 10 minutes of watching something.
Absolutely. And I'll go back to what I said earlier. I mean, just consume as much knowledge as you can. It doesn't matter what the subject is. It's going to make you a better leader, because understanding, the world around you is so important. That the last part that I'll talk about, and I think I talked about this a little bit earlier, is being adaptable. The world is changing so fast, and it's getting, that rate of change is increasing rapidly. And with the proliferation of the types of technology that we're talking about, especially AI, it's going to change. There's going to be changes with AI that we can't even imagine there. So being adaptable, being able to change, being able to pivot as a leader are going to be extremely important competencies coming forward. They've been important for the last few years or last decade, but they're going to get even exponentially more important over the next decade, I think.
I agree. And Chief, what an amazing set of knowledge that you just put forth and discussion. I could continue this discussion for onwards for up to an hour or more. And in respect for your time and the listeners and viewers, this is a great time for Maddie to come in and close this out. But I just want to say thank you. Thanks for the leadership. It's very clear the type of leadership you're providing, the type of knowledge you're bringing your agency, the care you have for this profession, and your vision. So on behalf of all of us at USD Lepsel, thank you so much for what you're doing.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure doing this.
Thank you for taking the time to meet the law enforcement heroes and leaders who are part of the MS Lepsel family. You can find more episodes of Blue Leadership on Facebook and YouTube. And if you'd like to learn more about the Lepsel program, visit us at criminaljustice.sandiego.edu.